So hey guys, real quick, I need to mention that while this video was originally edited with normal footage, the Death Note musical is kind of an iffy thing to show, so instead I had to change the way I edited it, so sorry about that. Anyways, on to the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Death Note month. So, have you ever been watching Death Note and thought to yourself, man, I love this show, but I wish it had more singing in it? Well, your incredibly specific wish has actually already been granted, as I'm not kidding, someone decided to make a whole musical out of Death Note. Okay, but why? Like, who came up with this? A story about a student finding a notebook that can off people and decides to use it to become a god. I mean, that doesn't exactly scream make me a musical. I mean, it doesn't even scream at all, it's an anime, what were you expecting? Well, someone clearly wanted that, because, I mean, it exists now. So, let's talk about it. I am the Death Note guy after all, and this thing is just too bizarre to skip over. So, let's go. Now, I'm gonna try and not spoil too much about it, as I actually think it's worth watching, even if just for the novelty factor. What I can say is that the musical actually does try and follow the general plot of Death Note as a whole. I mean, sure, there are some differences here and there, and some stuff is obviously left out since the thing is 2.5 hours, even with music included. But I gotta say, I'm actually kind of impressed that it still works. Scrunching up a story as long and as eventful as Death Note's can oftentimes be rather dangerous, as you risk taking out far too many key moments. But somehow the Death Note musical manages to cram in most important things in the short 2 hours it has. And I mean, that's great, but how successfully does it portray the themes of the show itself? I mean, it's one thing to just make Death Note's story, but it's an entirely different thing to understand what Death Note was actually trying to accomplish. A certain Netflix film certainly comes to mind when it comes to lacking interpretations of the original material. And I'm glad to say that, as insane as it sounds, the musical actually does a fairly impressive job in almost every case. Starting with the characters themselves, I mean, it's pretty much what you'd hope for. Light is initially justice-seeking, but as the story continues, gradually gets corrupted by power. He even manages to retain some of the more creepy aspects that the anime gave Light, which is rather impressive considering how musicals are typically kind of goofy. Which, yes, this one's goofy too, but, we'll talk about that later. Regardless, Light is done really well. I think one of my favorite moments involving him is when Sayu, his younger sister, begins singing about how Kira is bad and should be more like her brother Light, and he just sits there looking so uncomfortable, it's amazing. Ella's done pretty well too, being pretty spot on in pretty much every way. He still seems smart and weird, and the actual makeup makes him look exactly like how Elle should look in live action. Misa is actually done pretty fantastic as well. I love especially that every song she has is a love song, but hearing just how in love she is with Light borders on obsession. It makes her love seem a lot creepier than it was portrayed in the anime. Also, for those of you who found Misa in the anime annoying, which I was not one of them, she is a bit calmed down here, so you probably would like her more in the musical than you actually did in the original series, so there's that. Ryuk is still his goofy old self, being used for gags a good number of times. I mean, sure, he's no match for the anime Ryuk, but there's still some pretty fun moments. Though, I will admit that Ryuk oftentimes has some of the, iffier songs. I mean, they're not bad necessarily, but I gotta admit, the song They're Only Human gets a bit aggravating to listen to, and it's a bit too long for my liking. Everybody else has done well enough, but not specifically notable, which is fine. The most important thing is getting Elle and Light right, since they are literally the driving forces of the story as a whole. And the musical does do those two justice, which is great. And actually, mentioning justice, it's kind of noteworthy how well the musical pulls off that major theme of the original show. The concept of justice, and how its meaning changes depending on the person using it, the whole aspect was a massive theme in the anime. The musical, shockingly, still gets the idea across. I mean, sure, it's a bit more ham-fisted in this case, with one of the first songs, Where is the Justice, literally being an argument between Light and his teacher about what justice means, but regardless, I'm glad it's there at all, if I'm being honest. I might as well mention it here since someone's gonna ask me about it. Yes, the Death Note musical is a much better interpretation of Death Note than the Netflix film could ever hope to be. It's definitely not perfect, but it at least attempts to do the original story and its themes justice. It actually understands what Death Note was about, what its characters are supposed to be like, and what the show was trying to say. The Netflix film has virtually none of that, meaning that it lost to something that has Light and Elle battling through song. Also, unlike the Netflix film, the musical also isn't afraid to get into the campy territory the original anime did. Like, I'm serious, if you thought the tennis match in the anime was ridiculous, you haven't seen anything yet. Not only do Light and Elle still play tennis here, but they do it while trying to outsmart each other while singing. Even better is that there isn't even a ball being passed back and forth. It's kind of hilarious. Also, something I really like about the musical as a whole is that it never really tries to take a side in this conflict. Neither Elle nor Light are painted as the bad guys, and yet neither are made out to be the good guys either. In fact, several times throughout the musical, they make it a point to mention that both Elle and Kira are doing some pretty bad stuff in an effort to try and beat their rival. I like this approach because it paints things how the show did. Light and Elle are neither good or bad. They exist in a moral gray area, trying to prove their own justice is the correct one while ignoring any of the iffy things that they're doing. The musical seems to understand that there's a lot going on here, and that there's no simple answer for any of this. But wait, how the heck have I gone this far without actually talking about the very thing that's so notable about the musical? That being, you know, the music itself? Okay, so I know how it sounds, but please just trust me on this. The Death Note musical has some absolutely stellar tracks. It's actually kinda nuts just how catchy some of these songs are. But actually, you don't have to take my word for it, I guess, because I got a group of people that were willing to help me cover a couple of these tracks for some reason. So, here we have some of the musical's best tracks covered by the wonderful people who responded to my request on Twitter, and me too, actually. Enjoy!
Could this be the hour, unimagined power, waiting to devour who I said? The hottest rays, the coldest winds, are waiting for the hurricane, the human stays in all their sins blown away.
Could it be possibly I'll catch him when I look through his eyes, see what he sees, and then improvise until I can love what puts him at ease.
The game begins the same way. I look for patterns on the screen.
Spend what's left reminding you my restless life is worth so much more because of you worth living for. If I find you, maybe love me too. I'll only love you more.
Just bad code that keeps repeating. Is this the way it ends now? How could I not see it coming? My camera's cloudy lens now takes much darker pictures than before. So, how'd they sound? I mean, I liked them personally. And if you liked that, well, you're in for a treat because there's a ton of good stuff in the soundtrack. Like, seriously, I went kind of expecting mediocrity because it's a musical on Death Note, but jeez, dude, it turned out fantastic. Some of my favorites include the tracks Where Is the Justice, The Hurricane, The Game Begins, I'll Only Love You More, The Way It Ends, and my favorite of the bunch, Stalemate, just to name a few. I'm serious, it is seriously a stellar selection overall, which is good, because otherwise they would have just served as annoying pace breakers, which I will admit, they do break the pace up quite a bit, and sometimes it feels like they go on a little too long. Regardless, they're still fantastic and definitely worth watching the thing for on their own. But, you know, overall, I'd really recommend checking out the musical. I mean, sure, it's kinda goofy, and I mean, that's expected. It's a little hard to take it seriously when the characters are singing at each other while battling, but that's sort of half the fun here. It's a fun kind of goofy, and makes the whole thing a lot more fun to watch overall. Combine that with a pretty solid interpretation of the original story, and an amazing set of tracks to listen to, and you have a fairly entertaining show overall. If you ever have the chance to watch it live or something, I'd really recommend giving it a go. I promise it'll be worth it, even if just for the novelty of watching a musical Death Note alone. There's not many cases where you're gonna get to see Light Yagami sing, and this is one of the very few, so I'd recommend checking it out. But hey, maybe you're looking for something to watch right now. Well, you're in luck because I just posted a full video on Super Metroid on my second channel, so why not head over there and check it out. If not, check out some of my other Death Note month content. It's all pretty good. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video.